Welcome to the Aspirational Healthcare Conference. I'm Jack London from Patient Pal. We really have a fantastic series right now for you today. This session, which is called Balanced and Aligned Focus on the Customer, is peppered with some distinguished guests, and I'd like to introduce them at this time. Mr. Bill Lacey is the CEO for the Association of Corporate Health Risk Management. Frank Stichter, the president of Strategic Health Plan Consulting. Mr. Jonathan Harris is the former underwriter for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Utah, and now he's in the employee benefits consulting arena. And Daryl Moon, founder of Orion. What I like about this topic is truly that I believe it's come full circle. Healthcare has come a long way, where most of the time people just received a card and their healthcare card just said, okay, you call this number or you go to these doctors or you go to these hospitals. And that really was the extent of their education when it came to understanding what their health plan was all about. Well, I think collectively today, we'll have an opportunity to talk clearly about how that has changed and what is the dynamic of getting the customer involved. And I'm going to tee that up to you, Bill, and let you share with us your concept about engaging the employee and the employer together.
Thank you, Jack. And I want to thank Aspirational Healthcare for having me today. And so the Association for Corporate Health Risk Management is made up of over 1,000 employers across the country, and they come together to find innovative ways to containing their healthcare costs as well as managing their health risks. Essentially, we're talking about disaggregating or disintermediating, unbundling what the traditional health insurance carrier has provided for the employer. We, ACRM, have broken this down into 9 different buckets. And we're going to be adding another 1 or 2, which I'll be talking about that in a second. But just to quickly go through this, claims audit, payment integrity. As you can see on the slide, it's identifying errors. You're looking back 12 months, 24 months, 36 months. The second bucket is a critical one. How do you self-insure? Do you use the major insurance carrier, or do you engage an independent third-party administrator? Independent meaning a non-insurance carrier-based TPA. That's a critical stage here. After doing that, many of our employers will carve off or separate their pharmacy benefit management. That easily can save 30% of your costs in drug spend. The next 2 categories are how you partner or work with your medical provider. Reference-based pricing is a more aggressive form. You can write that into your plan. Many times reference-based pricing can lead to direct contracting. This is where you're structuring a direct relationship with your medical provider or physicians. The next category is when you take a greater control on this and you'll look at opening up an on-site clinic, a near-site clinic, or engaging the local primary care physician. Our next bucket, it became very widespread as a result of the pandemic, telemedicine. But the critical area in telemedicine is employee utilization. For most telemedicine providers, it's very low. Next category, employee well-being. This covers a variety of areas, including prevention, wellness, mental health, safety, workers' comp, etc. The 9th area is the most important, and that's data analytics. How are you capturing your data, how you're managing your data, and how are you using this to support your executive C-suite decision-making process? The 2 other areas that we're looking to add are something that has developed in the last 7 to 10 years, and this is digital care. This is a widespread area. There's over 100 firms that have been introduced. Lots of capital is flowing into these firms, and this covers into really 3 or 4 areas: chronic disease management, behavioral health, musculoskeletal, and telemedicine. I wanted to give you an illustration of these cost containment strategies in a project that we recently did for the city of Chicago. We found roughly of the $500 million spend that they have, about 150 million of savings could be realized if you were to implement these strategies. And I won't highlight all the specifics here. You can read that, but you can see that there's some significant savings that can be generated by implementing this strategy or these series of strategies. The reference-based pricing, direct contracting, between the two, you're close to $40 million. And we had a smaller amount for employee well-being, just because that is not a typical ROI generator. And for those that are looking at those programs, we recommend that you try to generate a one-to-one ROI. A critical part of your mission here is you need to have an effective consultant or broker advisor standing alongside of you. Our association runs a series of webinars to help in evaluating that. You're going to get to hear from Frank Stichter in just a moment. And critical areas to think about is the compensation. How is your advisor being paid? The traditional model is that advisor is getting paid by a third party, not by you, but by somebody else. So you need to understand that. We will be seeing in the next few months, December 27th, new legislation will be coming out, and that's going to require full transparency of these fees, both direct as well as indirect. And I recommend that everybody take a hard look at that. How much is your consultant generating from your account? A couple of personal stories. My career spans over 35 years, and I was a CFO for many of those years. I was also the first corporate risk manager for Pico Energy, a large utility based in Philadelphia, which today is Exelon, the largest power supplier in the country. Part of that understanding is whenever I met with my broker, I always had concern because, as I mentioned before, he or she was paid by somebody else. So many times those that advice or that guidance, you need to be suspect. Is it really beneficial to me, or is it beneficial to the consultant's pocketbook? And so we're going to get to hear more about that today.
Bill, you brought some great points to the table, and certainly when you look at all of the different aspects in the cost containment area, I know that in reading what Frank has talked about briefly in the organization that he is part of, which is Health Rosetta, I believe that's almost the founding aspect of it. Is that correct, Frank?
Absolutely, Jack. I think the balance and alignment and focus with customers is it's a perfect title for this, because at the end of the day, brokers' interests are not aligned with employers. They're aligned with insurance companies. So if a broker's getting a commission, they get a pay raise every time an employer's costs go up for doing what? I think Bill hit it on the head. How do brokers get paid by a third party to sell something to an employer? It's just a strategy how does it exist like that? And I think with Bill's 9 points, what we're talking about here is getting away from BUCA, Blue Cross, United, Cigna, Aetna, and unbundling your plan so that you can really use best-in-class vendors to reassemble that program at a more cost-effective and more service-efficient way. When you're choosing your broker, though, and I kind of my moniker is really, I want to get away from that broker, because a lot of people think brokers, they're all the same, and maybe they are, but I want to be an advisor, a partner to my clients, and all my clients have unbundled self-funded plans, partially self-funded plans. But what employers in the audience need to know is when you select that broker, are they gonna be knowledgeable and adept at vetting all these different programs? Nine of maybe an employer's plan doesn't include all nine, but it certainly includes a lot of those components that Bill was talking about. And you don't have to be a large employer to do this. You just have to have somebody to help guide you through this process and make sure that your consultant, your broker, that they're using the right vendors. And in selecting that, I think there's a couple of fundamental things that Bill touched on with how they get paid. We talked about kind of the misalignment of insurance companies paying brokers to sell something to an employer. But, I would be asking the question, how much of their revenue comes from a BUCA? I mean, and I'm including overrides, books of business. How many of the broker's clients are actually self-funded? I mean, are they just kind of giving lip service here that they can do this, or are they really being effective in this space? When I do my seminars, when I used to do live seminars before COVID, I used to ask the audience, when was the last time your broker consultant brought you an idea or ideas that could save you 20 to 40% of your healthcare costs? And everybody would look at me like a deer in headlights. And then somebody would say, they'd raise their hand and say, never. I said, right. Why is that? Is it because they don't have any ideas? In which case you probably need to find somebody new. Or is it because they don't want to? They don't want to give you ideas. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, why is that? And somebody will say, money. And I'm going, bingo. That's it. Traditional brokers want to preserve the status quo. They get paid handsomely for it. They don't have to work so hard at it. They just send something out to market. But there's a whole lot more to this than just marketing with a BUCA and changing from one insurance company to another with purported larger discounts. I mean, reference-based pricing is on the cutting edge. Jack, you mentioned direct contracting. That's on the cutting edge. And that's when you got to get away from this purported discounts. But your broker has to be transparent. They've got to give you full disclosure, because Bill mentioned pharmacy benefit management. I can assure you, because I've been on the other side of that table, where a PBM says to me, Frank, how much do you and your company want in rebates? Of all the rebates, do you want 25 cents on the dollar, 30 cents? We're going to keep a little, then we'll give the rest to the client. I mean, and those aren't disclosed. Those are not disclosed. A lot of other things are not disclosed. And I know Johnny's seen some of this. But it really is about transparency and full disclosure. And, to tell you another story, before I started my own company, here's kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. And I come from a whole family of attorneys, my father, my uncles, both grandfathers. And when I started in this business a long time ago, my dad told me, if you put everybody's interests ahead of your own, everything will be just fine. So I'm working on a hospital here in Colorado, and they had a BUCA. And in fact, they had Cigna. That's okay. They had Cigna. And I put together an unbundled self-funded plan for them. It saved them a lot of money. And out here, critical access hospitals, they don't have their margins are pretty thin anyway. And when I brought this sold case to my manager, he goes, Frank, we are not changing this to a self-funded plan. We'll take the broker record and keep Cigna. Cigna pays us a lot of money. We're not changing. I mean, I said, John, who are we working for? That's Cigna right. Or the client? So, really at the end of the day, if you really want to get a broker involved with you, they've got to have skin in the game, not just take a commission and just go on automatic pilot. They should have skin in the game and put their money where their mouth is. If they think they have an effective plan for you, let them go at risk. Let them take some of the risk. If you're successful, they should get rewarded. If they're unsuccessful, why would you pay them? In fact, we've talked before, why not give HR a similar incentive? I mean, their HR is very closely aligned with the broker, more so than the CEO and the CFO. And quite frankly, there are plenty of companies, HR people that don't want change either because it's more work for them. So let's give them an incentive to bring together a high performing plan and tie them with the broker to work together to do so. And I think, that's kind of a winning formula, it seems to me.
Frank, you mentioned the HR people. I think the term that they like to say, they don't want to hear the noise. And
Don't want to hear the noise.
They don't want to hear the noise. And you're right. But they, at the end of the day, are the ones that have such a huge influence on where that health plan is going.
Oh, no question about it. And, one of the challenges you have is trying to turn them around because they've been, strategically involved in selecting the plan that they have already.
Right.
So you can't very well tell them they're not doing a very good job. You just need to say, here's how we can elevate it to the next level and make it high performing.
Yeah, absolutely right. Not to mention that they've been wined and dined by the BUCAs for a long time.
There you go. There you go.
Away from. Daryl, if I may, I know when you founded your company and you were as a hospital administrator, you saw the need for the engagement of the patient long before I think a lot of folks did, and I applaud you for that. How do you talk about the difference between you've got the customer, and we've talked about now the broker's influence in that to that employer, but at the end of the day, it's the employee that's spending the money, and they're the ones that we really need to somehow engage and in control. I know you've spent the last 25 years of your life working on that opportunity. Please share some of that with us, if you would.
Sure. So, this track is about both a balance and an alignment with the customer. And if you look at the customer being the patient, the member, and you look at what control that person has on their own health versus what the healthcare system's control has, there's no question that 90% of the determinants of what causes chronic conditions and how people live with chronic conditions is the person. They're in control. They manage their own life. And it was amazing to me when I was running hospitals to see that this $4 trillion industry spends very little money influencing people to try to live healthier. So I left the treatment side to do that, to build the ability to have a positive influence by partnering with the individual and supporting them in their own health. And I think NUCA, as we've been highlighting NUCA during this conference, they were such a successful system because they did just that. They said, look, if 70% of the cost is what the person does, then why don't we put and balance the focus of the providers to where 70% of what they do is supporting and influencing people. It's more important that primary care be influencing people to live healthier than to just be order placers to get an x-ray or to order a pharmaceutical, a prescription, or to be diagnosticians or to create treatment plans. It's far more important that we influence people. So let's put a tremendous amount of focus on that. We've been talking about the alignment, and I get a chance to get in front of hundreds and hundreds of CEOs on a regular basis because I speak to the world's leading CEO organization, Vistage. And I love to ask them, why are you willing to spend so much money on these health benefits? It's often your second largest cost. And it's interesting, they always tell me the following four things in the following order. First and foremost, I want to attract and retain good employees. Number one, and I'm willing to spend an enormous amount of money to get that. Number two, I want a healthy, productive workforce. And because the product that goes out the door is incredibly better when you have a healthy, productive workforce. Their customers are happier. And they want their employees to be satisfied with the healthcare system and the benefits. And then they say, I want it to be affordable. And we say, okay, so how many of you have aligned your HR director to where they get more money or have incentives when you get all four things? And are you tracking to see whether you're getting them? And they look at me like, no, but that's an actually very good idea. So if your HR director was focused on helping you accomplish the things you want, they would in turn do the same thing with the benefit consultant, and they would get to make more money as the employer gets those four things: attract and retain top talent, healthier, productive workforce, employee satisfaction, and more affordable. So those are my thoughts.
I think they're great thoughts. I know, Jonathan, in your capacity at Blue Cross Blue Shield Utah as an underwriter, you, I think, would look for the things that we're talking about today, as far as cost containment initiatives in that and engaging the patient. Would you not before you work through an employer's evaluation?
I appreciate that. And yes, as an underwriter, we were always on the lookout for controlling costs, but I actually really appreciate what's been shared by Daryl, Frank, and Bill already, because if you're like me, some of these stories should have been very alarming to you, Mr. and Mrs. CEO. And now that I'm on the employee benefits consulting side, I have the almost displeasure of saying that these stories are far more common than rare. These are not one-offs, once in a career that we're talking about. And just while I have 5 minutes of your time, I wanted to share 2 stories that were common when I was on the large group underwriting side. And so for those of you that might not be aware, large group underwriters at these BUCAs, at these insurance carriers, are going to do your self-funding, but they're also going to do your fully insured as well. So the first story has to do with how we interacted with brokers. By and large, the grand majority of them, not all brokers, and I want to be fair, but certainly the vast majority. And it's this this mirage of delivering value to you, the customer, and this whole track is on aligning with the customer. So what we would do is we would have an initial meeting with the broker when it came time for renewal, and I had bosses, and bosses instructed me, and these words have come out of my mouth: Mr. or Mrs. Broker, what do you want the renewal to say initially so that then you can go to your client and show this bad renewal and then come back to us, and we'll come down to where we're comfortable as a department, what the risk profile actually asks for, and you're going to look like a hero. Your client's going to be thrilled because you're going to have presented 5%, 10% savings, sometimes even more. Brokers, at least in my market, and I want to be careful, I do only really, in my experience, speak for my local market, but my goodness, can you imagine a more gross misalignment between what actual delivering real value is? And I like what Frank said when he said, when's the last time your broker came to you and said, I have a plan to save you 20 to 40% on your employee benefits spend? Unfortunately, this first story kind of highlights that the goal is to renew your business, and we've brought up that when you're paid on a commission and on an override, that is the only thing that matters to a broker in a lot of cases, which is unfortunate, to say the least, and hopefully alarming to a certain extent. So I think in sharing that story, I just hope that you, Mr. or Mrs. CEO, know to ask the question, basically empowering you, ask the question, is this happening? Because it's a misalignment. The second story I'm going to share and really conclude with that is probably a highlight that really got me thinking that I wanted to do something different with my professional career and move out of large group underwriting. I was working on a very large, very important client for the insurance carrier, and we were having a difficult renewal that year. The risk profile was indicating that we need to come in at above a 20% increase. I was working on it, and it was hard. You know, we had a lot of constraints in place. I won't bore you with the details, but I shared my concerns in a strategy meeting with the sales vice president over here at the insurance carrier, and he said to me, Johnny, don't worry about it. The broker that is representing this client is one of the most is on the most lucrative override program that we have. They've got to a point where their override is higher than what they're going to get anywhere else in the market. They would be insane to move this group. Don't worry about it. We'll work through it, but don't worry. Now, we've thrown around that term override a lot. Most of you probably know what it means, but essentially it's undisclosed income, usually 1 to 2, even 3% of premium on top of what they receive in commissions. And so in large cases, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, and that's not exaggerating. And so when the sales VP told me, don't worry about it, just go out with the 20, this isn't a big deal, they'll renew. And unfortunately and alarmingly, it was true. The group renewed, no problem. And it's because of this misalignment, this fundamental flaw in the whole model, the three parties, the insurance carrier, the consultant, and the customer. And I won't belabor the point more than that. Bill, Frank, and Daryl have brought up excellent points and really rounds out my thoughts. But I just thank you for inviting me, and I hope just sharing insights and how the sausage was made on the underwriting side was valuable to you. Thank you.
Absolutely, Johnny. Thank you very much. I'm sure a lot of people who are listening and watching are going to think in terms of now when we sit down with the underwriter and the broker and the stop-loss carrier, what can we ask them? I think you will have brought up some great points. You know, you talk about stories. Johnny, I have a story is sitting across from a BUCA in a client's role as an advisor, not as a consultant, but as an advisor. And one of the BUCAs were in there and they said, well, you know, what are your rates? What are your hospital rates? Well, I can't tell you that. You know, it's proprietary, which is the common sense. And the guy says, well, how much are we going to save? He says, I'm going to save you 45%. and the second question happened to be for me, which was 45% of what? what can you give me if you can't give me the rates? What can you give me that's going to share how they can save 45%? So, you know, the thing that I truly enjoy about this discussion is the fact that this is all on the cutting edge. All of the things that have been said are well intended. And the best part of it all is that it's for the employer's benefit, number one. Who's the client, as Frank had said? Who is the client? The client is the employer. It's their money. They're the insurance company now. And the employee is the user. So if we can tie those two together and certainly get the employee to buy off on their own health care, it's going to make a big difference all the way around. And I applaud all of you, but knowing that what we are attempting to do, we collectively, I think, are attempting to do, is to be able to change the face of healthcare by bringing savings that are not funny money, and it's certainly not rebates and not any of that stuff. It's literally what the cost of medicine is, to bring it to a level where we are not saying to the hospitals, look, we don't want to take, make you so that you have no margins, even though your margins may be small. We're just talking about a partnership here to work together to all of us to save money. Well, I want to thank our guests for being with us today, Bill and Frank, Johnny and Daryl. We know that change is about to come, and we've just tasted a little bit of it today. There's some great ideas on the table. It's up for discussion, and I know many of you will have a lot of questions for our panelists. And so if you wish to do that, you certainly are welcome to do that. But once again, thanks so much for joining us today.